Hello, ladies. Simone here, Director of Program Growth, and I'm with someone many of you know very well, Teresa Hodgins. Teresa, welcome to the Endow podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you here and can't wait to talk to you about our new high school studies. So Teresa, give us a little bit of your background with Endow and with your involvement with the youth.
Sure. I guess working with youth came first. So I was a youth minister and high school teacher before I got married and started having kids. And then once I started having kids, I was looking for sort of an outlet or a way to still keep working with the high school students that I really loved and missed a lot. And I had worked with Endow, had done an Endow study, and basically contacted them and said, hey, this high school study you have, let's do something different with it. And they were like, okay, you can do that. And so we started working on it. They said, give us a proposal. So we started working on it, expanding it to 4 books, helping it build on themes from John Paul II and Edith Stein, and just really trying to make something that would help high school girls because we just saw such a need for it. And so then it grew, and that's where it came from.
Well, that's fantastic. And it's obviously never too young for a girl to encounter her God-given dignity. So I'm so happy that these studies have finally been released and can be a great resource for the church. And I mean, there's 4 books, and I'm just going to read the names. Created for Love, okay, high school book 1. Created for Community, high school book 2. Created for Holiness, high school book 3. And Created for Mission, high school book 4. And each of these study guides have 6 chapters. So what I want to do is kind of go through briefly each book so that, whoever's listening can get a sense of kind of the table of contents for each book and kind of what the goal of each book is. But also know that chapter 1 of each of these books is available for free download. So you can check it out. And I guess it goes without saying, but we can say it again, that as I just mentioned, that it's never too early for women and girls to encounter their dignity. I'm not going to rattle off all the statistics of the alarming rates that youth are leaving the church, but I think this is going to be a very powerful tool for girls to encounter their dignity. So shall we begin with the first book, Teresa, Created for Love?
Seems like a good place to start.
So I'm just going to read the chapter 1, The Dignity of the Human Person. Excellent. Chapter 2, Authentic Love. Chapter 3, True Beauty. Chapter 4, Living in and Through Our Bodies. Chapter 5, Feminism in the Church and the Feminine Genius. Chapter 6, Living Your Femininity. And I guess for those who are unfamiliar with Endow, let me just explain briefly that the classic Endow method, again, you can use our study guides. They're customizable. You can use them in whatever method that you see fit, but the chapters are designed to be read out loud. So there's no homework, which I'm sure everyone will be very, very happy about. You can show up and you're literally reading the chapter out loud with the girls and answering the discussion questions at the end. So they're really great launching pads to having authentic discussions about the girls' experiences of God, of her, her friendships, what's going on in her life. And I really appreciate that. So Teresa, with this first book, what should we know about this first book and what its goals are?
Well, that's a big question. I guess, the table of contents is helpful, right? In just knowing, like, kind of these are the major themes. And it was one of those, like, okay, what's the first thing we want to tell girls, right? What's the first thing we want them to know? That I think a lot of it came from things that I wish that I had known as a high school student, and wish that I had really understood, like personally grasped as a high school student. Like, yes, I had religious ed, I had all my sacraments, I was from a good Catholic family, but I like didn't quite get it until college and later in my life, basically. And I was really hoping to kind of help these girls understand that a little bit earlier, just because it's so important, and because so much changes based on understanding this. And then kind of from there, doing what Endow does, which is helping them understand the feminine genius in particular, and how much the church loves women. And I guess I felt like, again, that was something that in high school I just didn't understand very well. And that we were told, we've all been told by the culture that the church hates women, right? But we know that that's not true. And that, again, later in my life, I encountered the writings of John Paul II, especially Theology of the Body and Edith Stein, and I really wanted to just introduce those ideas to these girls so that they would understand kind of where the church is coming from when they hear some of the things that might prickle them a little bit, right? Because they're so countercultural. And so I wanted in this first book to really go through and outline those teachings to help them get to that and why their feminine dignity is so important.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think we can't underestimate the culture's narratives that the church hates women, when in fact it's, like you said, quite the opposite. This is the church's the protection and endorsement and liberation of women. Women have are considered persons and have rights today in modernity because of Jesus Christ and what happened in the first century. Now, to trace that all the way back, right, is a project in and of itself. But I mean, I think that's so important. So there's the twofold: first, encountering your dignity as a human person, and then where does that dignity come from? And then second, how the church is a huge promoter of that. And I love the fact that you were on this path of encountering John Paul II, of encountering Edith Stein, and then God using you to write these studies. Let me read. We start this first chapter with this identity prayer as a beloved daughter of God. Let me read this prayer. I am a beloved daughter of the Most High God. I am a princess in my Father's house. I am made in the image and likeness of God. Jesus is my beloved and I am his. I am beautiful and precious in his eyes. He has given me dignity, value, and worth. I will place my hope in him and the power of his resurrection. I am greatly loved and greatly blessed. The Holy Spirit has chosen to dwell within my heart. The Spirit of God lives in me. I have a blessed mother who loves me with a mother's heart. I will walk in this truth. I will walk in purity and confidence. I claim this identity as my own. I claim this identity as my own. I claim this identity as my own today, tomorrow, and the rest of my life. Amen. That's our hope for our Endow girls. And gosh, there was something else I wanted to say about kind of the importance of the feminine genius, but it escapes me at the moment. Teresa, should we move on to book 2? And these books can be done out of order. So even though we have a progression, certainly you can follow the progression. And there's a certain logical progression to that, but you are not bound by that. So high school book 2, created for community. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at the table of contents for this one. Chapter 1, what is love? Chapter 2, loving your family. Chapter 3, what is friendship? Chapter 4, romantic love. Chapter 5, loving like God. And chapter 6, union with God, union with others. So what is our big takeaway here with this text?
In some ways, well, they're all my favorite, but I love this one especially. Because I think love is so misunderstood, especially by high school girls. And I felt like, as I was writing this, I felt like so much focus is put on romantic relationships for high school girls because they're really interested in them. But what I loved about this book was that I got the chance to sort of, yes, talk about romantic relationships, but also put those in the context of all of the other relationships of love that we have in our lives, right? And so talking about, we get to start with the 4 Loves from C.S. Lewis, which was just, I mean, it's just fun to think about those different, the different categories and the different ways we use love, and that in doing that, and it was something that I didn't get as a high school student, right? That we didn't think through things that logically.
Yeah.
And that it's something that makes so much sense when you take the time to stop and order it, right? And that when you do that, then it puts things in perspective, I think, and helps everyone to understand all of the relationships in their lives better and how they can still have meaningful, loving relationships, even though they're in high school. And they don't need, they don't need to be in romantic relationships, or if they are, putting them in the perspective of like, this is for marriage, or this is for a family, and you see what a family relationship is like through your own family and can work on that separately. And it's still important. It's as important, if not more important, than these romantic relationships that we're so interested in as high school students.
Yeah. I can see why this might be even though they're all your favorites, how this might be your favorite, just because it is such an important subject in the minds of high school girls and students. I wish, as you know, I also have a background in youth ministry and teaching high school theology, and I wish that I had these studies. These studies would have, again, it wouldn't have been necessarily in the curriculum, because we have our own theology curriculum in high school, Catholic high schools, but they would have been fantastic supplements for high school as well as for campus ministry in high school. So I really wish, and I would have probably used parts of them, because I taught C.S. Lewis's 4 Loves for my high school seniors. You're absolutely right. They were absolutely fascinated by it. They like philosophy and theology. They like going deep. They don't like things to remain on a superficial level, and they want to know how this matters for their life. I remember the moment a student came to me and said, so if sex is ordered to children, and that's in a marital context, then dating really doesn't make sense unless you're ready to get married. And I was like, yes, see what some good philosophical thinking can lead you to. In which case, if you're a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl, well, maybe this isn't where your emotional energy should be directed. So,
right. And to still say that, but then give them something else positive to say, like, well, friendship, like focus on building good friendships here. And your family is really important, because you'll also be learning things for later in life here. And I've just felt like a lot of times we don't give high school students the dignity to like stop and explain and like break it down for them but explain it in an adult way. Like to say, like, you can understand this, instead of just saying, no, don't date. It doesn't make sense. Like, explain.
Without the, like you said, the positive proposal of like learning who you are, that you're made for community, that you're made for deep friendship, all of those things. I really appreciate that. And Endow Women recently asked, can I use these, can I let my high school student girls do these studies without a parent present? I think you were there for that conversation, Teresa. And I guess, again, we don't have an Endow police, searching out what you're doing with these studies, but if you want them to, I mean, I have no objection, Teresa, maybe you have a stronger opinion, of girls being left alone with high school Endow studies. I would love for them to be reading these texts together, without a youth minister or parent present. Now, of course, this is going to be oftentimes facilitated by moms and by youth ministers, campus ministers, high school teachers, high school retreat leaders, and so forth. But, it's not the worst thing in the world if this is what they're choosing to talk about in their free time.
Right.
So,
and hopefully they'll have the courage to ask the questions, right? If they don't have the answers, just say, okay, we'll find an adult who does know. Like, they're not going to be coming up with bad questions from these texts.
Right, exactly. Okay, high school book 3, Created for Holiness. Chapter 1, The Universal Call to Holiness. Chapter 2, Stumbling Blocks and Hope. Chapter 3, Paths to Holiness, The Vocation of Marriage. Chapter 4, Paths to Holiness, Religious Life as a Vocation. Chapter 5, The Single Life. Chapter 6, Christ, His Church, and Our Lives. So, tell us about this text briefly.
Well, this one is funny because I did actually teach a course that I really wish I had had this text for. We just didn't have a text on vocation that explained vocation in a way that was approachable, or that made it sort of accessible to everyone, right? Because we think vocation, capital V, I'm not gonna be a nun in high school. It's very few girls who know they're gonna be a nun in high school. But the idea that we're all called to discern a vocation and that we're all called to holiness is a huge idea that is hard to approach for a high school student, right? But again, giving them the dignity and giving them the time of day to say, no, this is important for you now. And that it's something you can think about now, even though it seems far away, it will influence your whole life.
Yeah. Three high school girls, when I taught high school, entered religious life at 18 after high school. And I think there are more vocations to religious life, obviously I think that, because God is calling lots of women to become religious, but our culture, oftentimes our church, and not having more accessible resources, like you were saying, Teresa, sometimes parents can put up obstacles to girls recognizing. But I think what I like about the progression of these studies is that vocation isn't, and this is how I often see it done, the discernment done, which is a vocation isn't something to figure out. A vocation is a recognition of who I am. And so we have to begin with dignity on a basic level, a relationship with Jesus Christ, and then, with the Created for Community, that, as John Paul II would often quote, that man finds himself in a sincere gift of self. I discover my dignity in the context of a community. And then I recognize that my personal vocation is my relationship with Jesus Christ. And that can take many forms, a lot of which are to religious life and to priesthood and to marriage and many other things. But I think my big, and you've heard me talk about this a lot off record, Teresa, is that there's so much of an emphasis on figuring out the state in life and not recognizing that personal vocation is firstly a relationship with Jesus Christ. And then from that flows certain state and life vocations. So the form that a personal vocation can take is often marriage, is often priesthood, is often religious life, and so forth. And some are single. So it's, and some are called to lay celibacy. I mean, there's just so many different states in life that reside within the personal vocation. But I really love that I think we underestimate youth, right? There are many more youth in their early mid-teens that can hear God's voice saying, actually, you are called. But more than just that, the call to holiness, that first and foremost, because even if I become a nun or a priest or married or anything like that, I have to become holy. And there's no guarantee that under any of these state and life forms, I'm going to end up holy. So,
right. Well, and we only have 2 chapters dedicated to states in life of the 6, right? It's not even a majority of the book saying yes, those states are options, and they are things to think about, but it's not the whole picture of your call to holiness.
Exactly. I think if we focus more on the holiness thing, the vocation stuff will sort itself out. But anyway, all right. Book 4. I know I could talk about personal vocation forever. All right, book 4, Created for Mission. I think just this is my favorite. I love mission. I love the missionary. It's time to get out there, to go to all nations, to baptize. Let's do this. All right, Created for Mission. Chapter 1, Living the Adventure. Chapter 2, Call to Care. Chapter 3, Catholic Social Teaching. Chapter 4, the corporal works of mercy. Chapter 5, caring for the poor in spirit. Chapter 6, political involvement. Ooh, this is serious. Tell us about this book.
Right. You read those chapters and you're like, how did you only spend a chapter on each of those things? Like, I don't know how I did that. But I think it's important to say, like, the first 2 chapters sort of encompass the whole thing. And that idea of personal vocation is that it is an adventure, and whatever you're called to, you're not called to, I mean, you're called to all of it, but you're not called to all of it, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like, that we're each called to some individual mission. And that will take on elements of Catholic social teaching. It will take on elements of the corporal works of mercy, and the Beatitudes and political involvement, and that we can kind of see our individual lives in that broader picture of our community, whether it's a local community or a global community, but that our lives are individual and our mission is going to be different, depending on who we are, and that we have to see ourselves within that bigger picture. Because I think as a high school student, at least I felt like the bigger picture was so big, and like you want to get out there and you do want to impact the world. And the beautiful thing about the Catholic idea is that you can impact the world, and you do impact the world, but that it's not necessarily through starting a movement or becoming a congressperson or, something big, that you impact the world just by doing the little things, the little way of St. Therese, and living the life that you're called to live.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Teresa.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the little things are big things. Like becoming holy is a really big thing. So,
right.
And that I think everybody has a mission. I think this is the big question mark, for everyone. Do I really have a mission? Because it feels like I don't. But you do. And some people are kind of born with that huge awareness of their desire, others not. But I know that when conversion happens, mission follows shortly after. When the Holy Spirit happens to you, you want to go out and share it. And I think it's so interesting to see, like not everybody's called to be president of the United States or whatnot. There are externally big things, but becoming a saint, whether you're famous or not, is a really big thing. So the little way, talk about the paradox of Christianity. Saint Teresa of Lisieux, the little way, is like one of the most popular saints in the whole world. So, through her little way, she got really famous, by the way. I really like what Edith Stein says about that history is marked by, all sorts of, I'm paraphrasing, all sorts of hidden saints. I think the way that I'd like to kind of conclude this podcast, Teresa, is how can one use it? We talked about the method of reading reading the chapters aloud. How long does it take to complete each study?
So it's personal, right? It depends on your group. So I think in, sort of an ideal world, each chapter is a meeting, right? And so it would take 6 weeks to complete a chapter. In the real world, you may not complete a chapter in a meeting. You may have a great discussion and not move on to finishing all of the reading for a chapter, and that's okay. And so I think we would say sort of typically it'd be like 6 to 8 or 9 weeks kind of thing. But
yep,
we have groups who really just like to, the discussion is the best part, right? We build these questions in there to help get discussion going, and you don't want to cut that off to finish a reading in time. Like, no, don't do that.
Right.
Enjoy the discussion, and if it takes more than 6 weeks, great.
Yeah. So we have built study guide pages to kind of help you plan and navigate also the marketing materials, the promotion for these studies. We have all of that on our study guide pages. But like Teresa said, I think you as the facilitator has to see, like, how many girls do I have? How long do I have in reality? is this a 1 hour meeting? Is this a 2 hour meeting? And then, leave some room for the Holy Spirit, because sometimes just that first section is going to, set their hearts on fire with amazing conversation. And that's going to just be enough. So pray through that. You can't avoid prayer. I think one of the things that makes Endow in general, and what will make these studies so fruitful, is that when you were talking about, you went through religious education, you went through, all these things, but some of these messages failed to translate. That's because this, I think there's a kind of a weakness in being lectured to sometimes. What makes this method, the Endow method, so powerful is that you have the text in your hands. You've got the discussion questions in your hands, and then you're able to talk about it from your experience and pull out and draw out from your heart what's really going on. What are your true questions? What are your real experiences? And then the faith is not something kind of like abstract or just something I have to kind of consent to, but then the faith becomes reasonable because it becomes relevant to really what's happening in my life. So it's not this extra thing, but it's this thing that's helping me understand myself in the midst of everything. So I think that's what's going to be so powerful about these. I also want to mention that these can be used for retreats. You can organize a retreat and have a sample chapter 1. Those are free. Again, our chapter 1s are all free. You can print those, use those for a retreat, and then ask the girls to think about going off and or their moms or their youth ministers or however this is happening, to facilitate groups at your parishes. So again, there's a lot of creative ways you can use these. Teresa, any other concluding thoughts about these studies before we say goodbye today?
2 things.
Great.
First, I just want to point out that they're beautiful. We printed them, or they were printed in full color, and they're just pretty to look at, which I do feel like is lovely for high school students. Like, it's just nice to have things that are nice to look at. Beauty draws us in. And then second, we haven't talked about the saints at all, which they aren't the titles of the chapters, but it was really beautiful for me and a goal for me to find a saint to illustrate the theme of each chapter. And it was like, for me, getting to know new friends, and telling people about old friends, right? And just seeing the multitude of the almost all female, there are a few men who made their ways in there, but I tried to find female saints to illustrate each of the themes in each of the chapters, and it just came together really beautifully. They found me as I was searching, or as I was looking, and sort of fit their ways into the chapters. And it's, I think, for high school girls also just a really great tool to see how many different saints there are out there, so that they can see that each one's mission is different. By the end of, if they do all 4, they'll have gotten 6 times 4, 24 different saints' lives they've been introduced to. Wow. 24 different ways to get to heaven, and to be in relationship with God. And I just think it was a really beautiful. It was beautiful for me writing it and getting to know them, and I think it will be really beautiful for girls to see as they're growing, that there are that many different saints out there.
And how wonderful for you to be able to share all your saint friends to all these girls. I guess just hearing you speak and the beauty of all that made me think of the question, how were you changed in writing these?
It's funny because I mean, I don't know exactly. It's still changing me, right? Like, and knowing all of these saints out here and being able to I really did befriend a lot of them, because I tried to, a lot of the saints, I tried really hard to make them, to see the details in their lives that made them personal, and to convey that to the girls, because I feel like so often the saints are like out there and they're this perfect picture, but they're human just like the rest of us, and they have those details in their lives. And it really just helped me to see that the details in my life can also lead me to be a saint. Right? It doesn't have to be this perfect image of a pious person a nun or whatever. It's
none of the saints were fake. They were all real. But we make up things. Or certain representations of the saints are so two-dimensional, but none of them were like that.
No, right? And so writing about them helped me to see that. And I guess writing all of this sort of helped me to process my own faith journey and just seeing what the most important things have been to me, and then being able to share that was just a blessing to my life.
One of my prayers and wishes for the girls going through this, or for the moms or the youth ministers that use this, or is that I just, in my imagination, I see women, the adult women, doing their endowed groups, and then at the same time the high school girls doing their high school endowed groups, and that's why we want every girl to have her own copy of the book, because then the book becomes a journal. We have prayer journals actually that we're offering as well, but the book itself becomes almost like a sacramental reminder of the experiences. And yours are
I love that we put in space for notes
and all of that. I remember talking to an endowed woman in Phoenix, and she was showing me her library of endowed books. She said, this is my collection, and each one is a reminder of where I was in my faith journey when I was encountering that text. So what a great way for adult women to model that to high school women, that we carve out this time for study, for prayer, for community, and for discerning our mission and our personal vocation. So Teresa, thank you so much for pointing that out about the saints. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for writing these texts. And, I can't wait to see how they start to transform the lives of women and girls.